Can you trust them right now? Choose your pile. Sometimes piles also resonate strongly with certain zodiac energies. So pile 1 tends to speak loudly to Gemini, Libra, Scorpio, and Aquarius. Pile 2 will speak to Aries, Capricorn, Sagittarius, and Taurus. Pile 3 will speak loudly to Cancer, Virgo, Pisces, and Capricorn. For each pile, I've placed a crystal to represent the energy of that reading. So we have a clear quartz, a rose quartz for pile 2, and a moonstone for pile 3. So if that helps you choose a pile, I ask you to go there now, and when you're ready, we'll begin. So it's raining, pile 1. I'm sorry if you hear that in the background. Someone in this situation is not telling the whole truth. Now, that doesn't always mean betrayal, but it does mean something important is being handled quietly or strategically or behind your back. And the reason you clicked on this reading is because you can feel it. Your intuition has been tapping you on the shoulder saying something about this isn't clean. And this pile answers that question. Can I trust them now? And this is the 7 of Swords. This is your trap. And welcome to Hidden Gate Tarot. So let's talk about what the 7 of Swords actually represents. In the card, a man is sneaking away from a camp carrying 5 swords, while 2 remain behind. He keeps looking over his shoulder. This is the archetype of strategy, secrecy, and selective honesty. Not necessarily outright lies, but information being managed. Something is being kept out in the open. And when this shows up as the trap, in the question like, can you trust them right now? It usually points to a dynamic where one person already feels something is off, but has been talking themselves out of it. Maybe you've said things like, I'm probably overthinking. Maybe they just forgot to tell me. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. But here's the thing about the 7 of Swords energy. When something is clear and honest, it doesn't require that much mental gymnastics. This card appears when someone is navigating the situation quietly for their own advantage. Now that could mean avoiding accountability, keeping options open, not revealing their real intentions yet, or telling partial truths instead of the full ones. And the uncomfortable part of this card is that you may already know this on some level. Your body senses it before your mind accepts it, which is exactly why the next card matters so much, because this situation cannot stay in the shadows much longer. Something is moving toward clarity and exposure, and that's justice. This is the moment where the scales rebalance. Justice is card 11 in the Major Arcana, which reduces to 2 in numerology, and the number of partnership, contracts, and mirrored accountability. And in this position, the interface, justice represents the mechanism that reveals the truth. Because justice doesn't operate through emotion. Justice operates through facts and evidence and consequences. Reality catching up with someone's behavior. If someone has been playing quietly strategic games in this situation, justice brings the moment where those strategies no longer work. And this can show up in several ways. So that could be a conversation where the truth slips out, or something you discover accidentally, or behavior that contradicts what they told you, or a moment where you simply stop ignoring what you've already seen. Justice is the card of seeing the situation clearly for what it actually is. Not what someone told you it was, not what you hoped it was, but what the balance of actions and intentions reveal. And once that clarity arrives, something very interesting happens. The power dynamic shifts. Because the moment truth becomes visible, you are no longer operating in the dark. And that leads directly to the key. And that is the Ace of Swords. This is the sword of truth. In the card, the hand emerges from the clouds holding a blade crowned with victory. And the Ace of Swords is clarity that cuts through illusion. It is the moment where confusion disappears because the truth becomes undeniable. Sometimes that truth comes through someone finally saying what they've been avoiding. Sometimes it comes through your own realization. And sometimes it comes through the very simple moment where you stop asking, am I imagining this? And instead say, no, this is exactly what it looks like. And the Ace of Swords is not about confrontation for the sake of drama. It's about mental liberation. You see clearly. You think clearly. And once you do, decisions become very easy. Because clarity removes the emotional fog that kept you stuck. And that's why this card appears as your key. The power in this situation does not come from forcing someone else to be honest. The power comes from you seeing the truth clearly and acting accordingly. Once that happens, the entire situation changes. So here's the story of your pile. The Seven of Swords shows a situation where something has been handled quietly. That's information withheld, intentions unclear, or honesty only partial. Justice brings the moment where truth and consequences balance the scales. And the Ace of Swords gives you the power that comes from finally seeing things exactly as they are. So the real answer to your question, can you trust them right now? Not fully. But the truth about this situation is already moving towards the surface. And when it does, you'll know exactly what to do. Hi, Pile 2. Again, I'm going to apologize about the rain. The person you're asking about probably does care about you. But right now, something between the two of you has turned into a contest, a clash of wills, perspectives, expectations. And when that happens in a relationship, trust doesn't disappear. It gets tested. And that brings us to the Five of Wands. And this is your trap. So welcome to Hidden Gate Tarot. Let's look at what this card actually shows. So it's 5 figures holding wands, not attacking each other exactly, but colliding. Their movements overlap. Everyone is swinging, defending, reacting. It's chaotic. And no one is really listening. This is the archetype of friction, not necessarily hostility. It's about too many strong energies occupying the same space at once. When the Five of Wands appears as a trap in a question about trust, it usually means something very specific is happening in the dynamic. So 2 people who cared about each other have entered a moment where ego, emotion, or misunderstanding is driving the interaction instead of clarity. Conversations become arguments. Points become positions. And suddenly the relationship feels less like a connection and more like a series of reactions. One person says something defensively, the other responds emotionally, and now both people feel misunderstood. This is where the trust question begins to emerge, not because someone has betrayed the other, but because conflict has created uncertainty. You start wondering, are they against me? Do they even understand me anymore? Are we fighting for the relationship or against each other? And the Five of Wands is the card of competing perspectives. Everyone involved believes they're right. Everyone believes they're reacting fairly. But the more each person tries to win the argument, the further the connection itself drifts into the background. And when the connection gets lost in the noise, trust begins to wobble. Which brings us to the interface. Because there is a specific kind of strength required to move a situation like this forward. And it's not the kind most people expect. So here's strength. Card 8 of the Major Arcana. And notice what the card actually predicts. A woman gently holding the jaws of a lion. Not forcing it, not overpowering it, simply calming it. This card has often been misunderstood as brute courage or dominance, but that's not what strength represents. Strength represents mastery over reaction, the ability to remain calm when emotion is rising, the ability to pause because instinct says fight back. In the context of this pile, strength is the mechanism that transforms conflict into understanding. Because when two people are locked in the Five of Wands energy, both of them are reacting. Both are defending their perspective. Both are escalating without necessarily meaning to. Strength interrupts that pattern. It asks a very difficult question. What happens if someone chooses not to escalate? What happens if someone steps out of the contest entirely? Not by surrendering their position, but by approaching the situation with emotional maturity instead of emotional reflex. That's what the woman in this card represents. She doesn't defeat the lion, she soothes it. Which means the interface in this pile isn't about forcing the other person to change. It's about someone, possibly you, becoming the stabilizing force that allows the situation to settle. Because when conflict energy cools down, something important becomes visible again. The thing that exists before the argument began, the connection itself. And that connection is exactly what the key reveals. That's the Two of Cups. Two figures facing each other, each holding a cup. Balanced, reciprocal, equal. In tarot, the Two of Cups represents mutual emotional recognition. Not attraction, not projection, recognition. So two people seeing each other clearly and choosing connection. This is why the Two of Cups appears as the key to this pile. Because beneath the friction of the Five of Wands and beneath the emotional turbulence that conflict creates, the foundation of this relationship may still be very real. But real connections still require care and maturity to survive difficult moments. The Two of Cups doesn't mean the relationship is effortless. It means the relationship is worth the effort. Which brings us back to the question you arrived with. Can you trust them right now? And the cards say something subtle but important. You can trust the connection itself. But right now, the relationship is moving through a phase where emotions, pride, or misunderstandings are clouding how both people express that connection. And that's why the Strength card sits at the center of this reading, because emotional maturity, that's patience, listening, and restraint, becomes the bridge that brings the Two of Cups back into focus. Not by winning the conflict, but by remembering why the relationship mattered in the first place. So here's the structure of the pile. The Five of Wands shows the friction. That's two people colliding in perspective, emotions, or expectation. Strength becomes the turning point, the moment when someone chooses calm over escalation. And the Two of Cups reminds you what exists underneath the noise. A connection that may still be very real. Which means the answer to the question, can you trust them right now, is a nuanced one. You can trust the heart of the connection. But the way both of you are navigating this moment may need patience, maturity, and space before that connection can fully reemerge. And I'll see you at the next gate. Pile 3, This pile usually appears when someone feels something shifting, but can't quite explain what it is. The messages have slowed down. The energy feels different. Nothing dramatic has happened. No clear ending, no obvious conflict, but something in the connection feels like it's moving away. And the difficult part is that you're left wondering why. So, this is the Eight of Cups. And this is your trap. Welcome to Hidden Gate Tarot. The Eight of Cups is one of the quietest cards in the entire tarot deck. A single figure walks away from a row of cups. Nothing has been knocked over. Nothing has been destroyed. Everything is still standing, and yet the person in the card is leaving. This is the archetype of emotional withdrawal. Not necessarily abandonment, not necessarily rejection, but the moment when someone begins turning inward instead of outward. And when this appears as the trap in the reading about trust, it usually reflects a very particular emotional dynamic. Someone in the situation has begun creating distance. Maybe they're quieter than they used to be. Maybe conversations feel shorter. Maybe a sense of hesitation where there used to be enthusiasm. And because there hasn't been a clear explanation, your mind starts searching for answers. Did I do something wrong? Are they losing interest? Are they slowly leaving? But the Eight of Cups rarely represents someone walking away out of cruelty. More often, it represents someone walking away because something inside them is shifting. They're processing something, questioning something, trying to understand what they feel before they act on it. The difficulty, of course, is that emotional distance is incredibly uncomfortable for a person standing on the other side of it. Silence creates uncertainty, and uncertainty creates fear, which leads directly into the energy of the next card. Because when someone withdraws emotionally, the space they leave behind quietly fills with something else. And that's the Moon. Card 18 of the Major Arcana. And this card represents one of the most complex psychological states in tarot. The Moon governs uncertainty, intuition, projection, and emotional fog. When you're moving through Moon energy, reality becomes difficult to interpret clearly. You see shapes in the darkness. You see movement, but you're not always sure what is real and what is imagined. And in the context of this pile, the Moon represents the mechanism that amplifies the withdrawal. Because when someone becomes emotionally distant, the other person naturally tries to fill in the blanks. And the mind, especially when it cares deeply, is very good at creating stories to explain silence. Some of those stories are accurate. Some of them are not. And the Moon doesn't necessarily mean deception. What it means is uncertainty without clear information. Both people in this situation may actually be moving through emotional confusion. One person withdrawing inward to process something they haven't fully understood yet. The other person standing outside that silence trying to interpret what it means. And the more uncertain the situation feels, the stronger the emotional current becomes. Which is why the key in this pile doesn't appear as clarity from the other person. It appears as something more personal. Because sometimes the way through uncertainty isn't chasing answers. It's stepping into your own clarity, and that's the Hermit. Card 9 in the Major Arcana. A solitary figure holding a lantern high in the darkness. The Hermit represents inner guidance. Not advice from others, not reassurance from the outside world, but the quiet wisdom that emerges when someone turns inward and listens to themselves. This is why the Hermit appears as the key in this pile, because when someone else's emotions become unclear, your power doesn't come from trying to control their process. It comes from returning to your own center. The Hermit's lantern doesn't illuminate the entire path. It illuminates the next step. And that is often all the clarity you actually need. Instead of trying to decode someone else's silence, the hermit asks a different question. What do I know to be true about myself and my needs? What kind of connection do I deserve? What feels aligned with my own inner compass? When you stand in that clarity, something interesting happens. You stop chasing answers, and the dynamic itself begins to shift, because people often return from emotional withdrawal once they're finished processing whatever they need to understand. And if they do return, the hermit ensures you meet them from a place of grounded self-awareness instead of confusion. So here's the structure of the pile. The Eight of Cups shows someone emotionally stepping back, not from anger, not from confrontation, but with distance. And the moon explains why that distance feels so unsettling. When someone pulls away without explanation, the mind fills the silence with questions, and the hermit shows what this person is actually doing on the other side of that silence. They're trying to understand something internally before they speak or act on it, which means the honest answer to the question, can I trust them right now, is this. Right now, this person may not be emotionally available in the way you need them to be. Not because they are necessarily dishonest, but because their attention is turned inward. They are figuring something out.